All right, all you cool cats and chickadees. I'm ready to make a video for Monday. Ought to be about the 6th of April. Everything's kind of running together. As you can see by that dramatic looking formula written over my shoulder, today we are going to review the use of the quadratic formula in solving quadratic equations. Now, some of you are here because I threatened to poison your dog if you didn't come here. And if that's all that brought you to the video, that's fine. Okay? Now, let's talk about what a quadratic equation is. First of all, a quadratic equation is an equation that has an x squared in it. See that little square? That's what makes it quadratic. Okay? It usually has more than just an x squared. It's probably got an x, and it's probably got other things hanging out there as well. So quadratic equation usually looks like this. The x squared can be by itself, or it can have any number, 1 to 9 there before it, plus, again, any number 1 to 9 before another x, and plus equals 0, okay? And any number 1 to, use your imagination, can go in here, all right? So what that means is that we have an equation that has something x squared plus or minus something x plus or minus some number and 0. Now, I'm going to tell you that those blanks there do not represent the things we don't know. We usually do know those, okay? And if there's nothing written there, it means that it's a 1, right? If you stare at an equation, it just starts off with x squared. That means it's a 1x squared, right? But the reason I'm leaving those blank is because every problem is going to be different, but there is going to be something there, okay? If you're looking at 1 and it says x squared plus an x, and then there's not this, that means it's 0 plus 0, right? So this is the standard way to write it. It can be x squared plus x plus whatever else equals 0. I say plus, it can be minus, they can be negative numbers as well. This is the standard form. You know how it is. Sometimes in math, we don't get it all nice and pretty. In other words, we might get something like x squared equals 2x minus 1. In other words, we've got an equation here, but we need to rewrite it so that all of our numbers are on the same side of the equal sign, and there's nothing but 0 left over there, okay? So how can we do that? If we've got x squared equals a positive 2x minus 1, well, what can I do? Well, I can subtract 2x from both sides, obviously. I can add a 1 to both sides. Look what that's going to end up looking like. It's going to give me x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0. See how I did that? I subtracted 2x from both sides. So that gave me a minus 2x. I added a positive 1 to both sides. That balanced that guy out, left him with a 0, and put a positive 1 over on this side. So I can have an equation in any form to start off with. This is still quadratic. Why is it quadratic? Because it's got an x squared. Okay, if it has x squared, and that's the biggest x, in other words, it's not an x cubed or an x to the 4th power. It's got an x squared. I'm like, boom, quadratic. Okay, and then I just rearrange them so that it's in this nice, neat, and pretty order where I've got an x squared. So the way that we communicate this, though, is because we don't know from problem to problem what's going to be in those blanks. We use letters, and we call this one A, call this one B, and call this one C, okay? So the standard form of the quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my a, my b, and my c, and I'm going to plug it into this number up here. Now, if you've got an x squared in your equation, that means that you're going to have two values for x. Let me show you what that looks like, okay? If I've got an xy graph, here's my y, here's my x, and I say that it has two values of x, in other words, there are two x's, what I mean is there are two places where x equals 0, right? For every given y, there are two x's. For every given y, there are two x's, right? So if I have x equals 0, okay, and I should say y equals 0, but if I have y equals 0, I have two values of x. Look what happens here, okay? Everything that's x squared, when graphed, will come out in a parabola, okay? In other words, everywhere that I look at y, if I say y equals positive 1, y equals positive 1, what does x equal when y equals positive 1? X equals this guy, x equals this guy. In other words, for every y, there are two x's, all right? So is it a function? Yes, it's a function. Remember our line, we talked about how if a certain equation is a function, you can draw a line that is vertical, and if it only crosses our graph one time, it's a function. So yes, this is a function. Remember that in a function, you drop in an x and a y pops out. Remember how that works? Drop in an x and a y pops out. The problem with a quadratic equation is that when for every y, there are two x's. In other words, there are two different equations that'll get you a given y. Okay, just like this. In this particular example I use, y equals positive 1. Well, x equals, let's say, negative 4, and x equals, let's say, positive 3. I don't have the numbers actually marked up there, so we're kind of guesstimating where those are. But if y equals 1, what does x equal? If y equals 1, x equals negative 4, and x equals negative 3. Now, let's do this again. Okay, paying attention to my standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Notice that my a is whatever number is attached to x squared, my b is whatever number that's attached to x, and my c is whatever number that doesn't have an x at all. It's just hanging out there. So let's just say I'm going to replace these with, I'm going to leave this as 1, okay? And I'm going to, let's do c equals 10, let's say positive 10, and let's say that b equals 2. All right, I haven't done this one in advance, but let's say this was a is 1, b is 2, c is 10. On your homework, I'm going to give you a quadratic equation. I'm going to say, what is a, what is b, what is c? And the way I know that you've watched this video is if you're able to say, oh, well, a is just whatever number is attached to x squared. Okay? Now, what I have to do is I have to set my plan up this way. Now, remember, I'm going to have two answers. I'm going to have two answers. And my two answers can derive from this guy right here, a plus or minus. So this is our quadratic formula. Our quadratic formula is how we solve our quadratic equation. Our quadratic formula is how we solve our quadratic equation. All right? And I'm going to change this guy. I'm going to make him 3. I'm doing some thinking in my head while I'm at it. Okay, so here we go. I have to set my problem up like this. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and all of that is divided by 2a, all right? So we have a few steps to do here, okay? Now I'm just going to take my numbers, and in order to give myself plenty of space, I'm going to go ahead and erase everything but those so I don't forget what I just told you, okay? So here's my problem. My a is 1, my b is 3, my c is 10. So x equals negative 3, that's my b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times 1 times 10. All right? Now, all of this is divided by 2 times 1. All right. Now I'm going to go back and solve all of these, paying careful attention to this guy in here. This b squared minus 4ac, when we work with this further, you're going to see that whether if I've got a positive number, a 0, or a negative number, it's going to tell me everything I need to know about my graph. We're not quite there yet, but just keep that in mind. All right. So x equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared, which is 9, minus 4 times 1 is -4, times 10 is -40. Okay. All of this over 2 times 1, which is 2. All right. So x squared equals -3 plus or minus the square root of -31. All of this is over 2. Here's where I've got a problem. If you run into this, I want you to write no solution. I'm going to tell you why. Okay? We have a negative square root. That's a problem. I can't have a negative square root, right? Because the square root has got to be two numbers times themselves. And two numbers times themselves, no matter what that number is, whether it's positive or negative, two numbers times themselves is always going to have a positive answer, right? -2 squared would be -2 times -2, which is +4. So I've ended up here with a no solution. I don't want a no solution. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to change my numbers. This is fine. Everything's correct here. You just write no solution and you're done. But I don't want to do that. I should have been working with something that I'd done in advance. Anyhow, okay, so I want this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my A, B, and C. I'm going to make this guy up here -10. Okay, and I'll show you why. Watch what happens. Let's get rid of all my extra steps here. Now let's do this again. And this time, since my C is -10, I'm going to have one that I feel fairly confident is going to have a solution. All right. So if my A were 1, my B were 3, and my C were -10, this is how I'd set up my quadratic equation. So here I go. X equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared is 9. -4 times +1 is -4, times -10 is +40. There we go, plus 40. Oh, I like that one a lot better. 2 times 1 is 2. All right. These were too close to each other. 2 times 1, so you don't think that that's part of the same step here, okay? I don't have a whole lot of room, so I'll put lines between my steps. All right, -3, x equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 49, all of that over 2, all right? Well, what's the square root of 49? What times what is 49? 7, okay? So I'm going to set this up over here. X equals -3 plus 7 over 2. And I have to set it up a second time because it's plus or minus the square root of 49. That means I have -3 plus 7. I have -3 minus 7. So x equals that. X equals -3 minus 7, all of that over 2. So here are my two problems. I have -3 plus the square root of 49, -3 minus the square root of 49. So let's look at this. X -3 plus 7 would be a +4, so x equals 4 over 2, or x equals 2. All right, I like that. -3 minus 7 is -10, so x equals -10 over 2, so x equals -5. So if we were graphing this, buddy, you know what this would look like? Let's just pretend for a moment that this is my xy axis. I've got when y equals 0, x is going to equal -2. 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to equal this. My graph's going to look like something like that right there. Okay? Now, notice that there are two x's for the y, and what I do is I have to find out where x is when y equals 0. All right, so that's how I do it. I set it up twice. I'm going to do one more. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab I'm going to grab the worksheet, and I'm actually going to do the first one from the worksheet. So if you're watching this video, instead of just playing it in the background, you're going to get one for freebie. Here we go. All right, so let's say that I'm just going to do the first one on the worksheet. We have x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals 0. So x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals 0. All right, so what's my A? My A is that understood 1. What's my B? Negative 3. What's my C? Positive 1. Okay, so let's set it up according to my quadratic formula. I have, and let me just write those and give myself plenty of room. So A, I said, was A equals 1, B equals negative 3, C equals positive 1. Erase this so I've got room. All right, just plugging letters in here. X equals negative 3. Some of you will mess that one up right away from the very start. Negative B means negative whatever B is, and if B is negative 3, it's negative 3. And what is that is? Negative 3 is a positive 3. All right, plus or minus square root of b squared, so negative 3 squared minus 4 times a times c. All of this is over 2 times a, which is 1. All right, so here we go. X equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 4, because negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. All of this is over 2 times 1, which is 2. All right, so let's set this up. I have x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. Now 5 is not a perfect square, right? I don't know the square root of 5, not right off the top of my head. I know that 2 squared is 4, and I know that 3 squared is 9, so I'm going to put it into my calculator. I know it's somewhere between 2 and 3, and it's a lot closer to 2 than it is to 3. So let's see what that looks like. I'm putting it into my calculator right now. I'm going 5, and then I'm going to hit square root. It's 2.236. I'm going to call that 2.2. All right? So I'm going to say x equals 3 plus 2.2 over 2, and x equals 3 minus 2.2 over 2. Okay? I'll make a little line there so we don't get confused. X equals 3 plus 2.2, that's 5.2 divided by 2. Let me just do this over again. Okay. X equals 5.2 divided by 2, and 5 point would be 2.6. X equals 2.6. Okay, so that's one answer for number 1, x equals 2.6. But then I need to say a second answer. This time, it's going to be 3 minus 2.2. Okay, which would be 0.8. X equals 0.8 divided by 2. 0.8 divided by 2 is 0.4. So I've got two answers for number 1. It is x equals 2.6 and x equals 0.4. Again, there's your quadratic formula, and you've got to identify your A, B, or C. All right. We're going to make it through this. gonna make it through this. We're gonna make it through this. You're gonna get good grades if you'll do your homework. If you don't do your homework, you're not gonna get good grades. That's the way it's gonna work.